So we are live. Welcome everyone to Not the Creation Wars Unplugged. This is a little show to pass the time while we take a little break from Creation Wars. It will be back next week. Not sure who's hosting yet, but we have plans afoot. We will be going through various different themes for one thing, some landscape themes. You'll notice that we did some other themes recently, like Level 20 Lounge and things like that were quite well received. So we have some ideas that we're just getting ready. For today, we have something a little bit different, and we are going to basically help everyone that we talk about today try and focus their goals and achieve their goals. As I think everyone is aware who's in the Arcanum, we have a big focus on goals. And it might be that your goal is just to take nice pictures, and that's absolutely fine, but there might be a more defined goal that you want to know if you've achieved. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about the images that we've had submitted and explain what people were trying to achieve with them. And then Glenn and Shiv, who are the masters on the Hangout today, will talk about what they think about these goals and what they think about the image overall, and hopefully get some way to helping you achieve the goals that you have. So goals, goals, goals. That's what we're talking about today. So just wanted to start with a little introduction. We'll get Glenn to introduce himself first, and at the end of the show, if you want to hang about, if you're watching, what you'll see is we'll have a little chat about what's going on Twitter, see some images that have been shared on there, and Glenn and Shiv will both talk about what they've been up to recently, so stay tuned for that. But Glenn, if you want to give a little quick 30-second intro about yourself, and then we'll pass over to Shiv, please.
Okay, thanks. So, hello Stu, hello Shiv, hello Jack, hello Greater Arcanum family. Yes, I'm Glenn Guy. I live in Melbourne, Australia. I've been here since the mid-80s, but I'm still a country boy at heart. I run a website educational blog called travelphotographyguru.com. I've been heavily involved in that for a number of years, and I've been in the industry now. I've just had my 36th anniversary. And a lot of teaching as part of that. But I brand myself as a travel photographer, but I guess I've done quite a few things over the years. So at heart, I'm a generalist, and I think that's one of the things that helps me be a good teacher. Done. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Glenn. And Shiv?
No, that was quick, Glenn, and I'll make it as quick as possible. So very quickly, I was born in India, moved to the States in 1978. Been with high-tech all my life. I think cameras are high-tech too. Right now, I live in a town called Rentham, which is on the Massachusetts-Rhode Island border. We do need passports to go to Rhode Island, even though we live in the States. It's kind of a funny state, but anybody from Rhode Island, you probably understand what I'm saying. I actually am also like Glenn. I love travel. I love travel photography. I do a lot of travel workshops. But I primarily spend my time in the process, what I call, of educating myself, and in the same vein, educating other fellow photographers. So the Arcanum is ideal. I'm one of the newer masters. So if I botch up, that's something to be expected. So let's move on.
Thanks very much, Shiv. And looking after Twitter today, we have Jack Thatcher. If you imagine Jack Bauer and Jack Ryan and mix them together, you get him. So, Jack, you want to chat about yourself for a moment?
Yeah, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm just a photographer by hobby, not professional or anything, but enjoy doing it. I am an apprentice in the Great Robin Griggs Woods cohort, and I'm just happy to be here. Today everybody can follow us using hashtag CWUnplugged, CWUnplugged. And feel free to share some images also using that hashtag, and if we have time, we will show some of them towards the end of the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to throw myself into the show, and I have a couple of my images that I'm going to share. I'm going to talk about my goals for especially I guess the second image more than the first, and I'd like Glenn and Shiv to give me some feedback on that, see if I achieved what I was setting out to do. So I'll share my screen now. If this causes everything to crash, then I'll speak to you all later. Okay, so can you guys see that first image?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a place in Scotland called Glencoe, and this was an image I took back in, I think it was around about September time. And what I was trying to achieve with this image was that this is a reasonably famous part of Scotland and been photographed hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of times. And in this particular cottage here, you see people wandering up to the general area all the time, and just off to the left of my frame there's a bridge that goes across the river, so people stand on the bridge and they take a picture of the cottage from there. They walk up the path a little bit, take pictures from there. I wanted to try and get a unique view for the cottage that isn't normally seen, so I got down in the river. I was standing on a rock and I got enough elevation to just peer over the riverbank there and get the scale of the cottage with the mountains in the background. And what I was conscious of at the time when I was there is that, you know, in the winter time when the snow was melting and it'd been a bit wetter, that this waterfall coming down in the background would be a lot more visible and it would be a little bit more of an interesting image. So I went back there around about, I think it was 1 or 2 weeks ago, and I decided I'm not going to go for the same exact angle because I'd be standing in the middle of an even stronger river. I don't even know if that rock was visible that I was standing on previously. And this was the image that I came away with, and it was my goal was to get a different look, a different angle, but the same scene overall, and see what I could do. Could I create a better image, one that felt different? So that was my goal. And what do you guys think? Glenn, you go first.
Okay, cheers. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful image. It's an idyllic location for a landscape photography. For landscape photographer, it does tell a story too, I suppose, just by having the human elements in there, the house in the background, and you can almost imagine a path jumping across the stones through the grass up to the house. So you know. And then that kind of continues on in a way through the up to the waterfall. So I think structurally it's good, and you know the low-lying clouds are really nice, really atmospheric. The colours are beautiful. The yellow-green grass. Yellow greens are very positive, I find. Blue greens not so much. So I think from a commercial point of view, it's a positive image because of the yellow greens. Structurally, I also like the big stand of tall trees in the middle of the image, and I like the kind of layers, like it's almost as though you go up from the bottom of the image, and then there's an imagined plateau, and then you go up again. So I think, which kind of divides it, you know, almost into thirds. The only issue I have, I think, is Stu, is with the overall density. I think you need a black in it, and subjectively we'd say there's a black. We'd look at the darkest tones, but they're not black. They're just a little bit less than black. And I think if you put some black into it, you'll get more shape and texture coming through. I actually think the lightest tones are a little bit bright as well. So it's very, very, very small. But I think if we brought down the highlights a bit, and if we intensified the blacks, I think you'd be right on the money. But as far as fulfilling, you know, your goals, I think you've absolutely done that. It's a gorgeous image, but those last little changes, I think, would actually improve it by 50%. Would improve the final outcome.
Awesome, thanks, Glenn. Shiv, anything to add to that?
Well, you know, I think Glenn's spot on with his comments, and clearly, you know, the image needs a little bit more contrast. And one of the things that, you know, I would do here is, since there is so much going on, maybe one of the ways to just look at it from a slightly different perspective is to simplify it and maybe take this into a black and white image. And then once you have that, you can actually address the tonality and look at the zone system to see whether it fits that black and white format. If it does, great. If it doesn't, at least it'll give you the idea of where you need to make the contrast adjustments to bring out this, a little bit more depth in the image. And as far as the sky is concerned, what I would do is just add a little bit more contrast there too, to sort of define the clouds a little bit, because they do tend to fade away, and because they are bright, putting a little contrast into that area would significantly help the overall perspective that you're creating. But as far as your goal's concerned, I think you achieved it. I would have loved to have seen you get wet again, and potentially do the same image that you did before, and do a one-on-one comparison to see, what happens different times a year. But, getting wet is your choice, not mine.
Thanks, Shiv. All very useful, and I think that I now know what I'm doing after the show today. I'm going and messing with that contrast. So that was your...
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, well, sorry, I just... Shiv gave a fantastic piece of advice then. If you've got the image in Lightroom, do you have it in Lightroom, Stuart, at the moment?
I do at the moment, but I've not got it open, so I will look at it afterwards.
Because all you'd have to do is click on the B and W panel, and you'll actually see that there isn't much contrast through most of the landscape elements, if you like, the earth elements. And then that tells you, for instance, you play around with your orange and yellow sliders, move them in opposite directions, possibly green, and then go back to colour, and you'll find you can really separate the tones much better that way. So, yeah, because we're all overcome by the colour, but by clicking on the black and white panel, you actually see that there's not as much local contrast as we might hope for. So it's a really, really good tip, because by being better in black and white, we do become better colour photographers, and we never think enough about contrast in colour because we are so seduced by the colour.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. So yeah, that's a little task for me for the rest of the evening. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to move on to the next image on my screen share, and then I have a few words from the apprentice who's sent it in, and then Shiv, I'll let you go first, talking about the image.
Sure.
Just give
I hope I have the right image open, and because I don't see it on your screen.
It should be coming
there we are.
now.
Yes. So it is the right image. And
yes,
one moment here to just pull this up a little bit.
No problem. And this should be one that may be familiar to Glenn, because it's one of his cohort members who submitted it. It is from Anita, and Glenn might want to say a couple of words about her when he comes around to talking about the image. But what she has said about it is it's an image about everyday life in Algeria. Dominoes are a favourite activity of the men here after work. Well, in many countries, men may meet after work in their local for a beer. This is how many men like to socialise here outside of the home. So, Shiv, what would you like to say about the image?
Well, I like what Anita has done, bringing these two people together the way she has. And what's interesting is that you see that light on the ground, and that light kind of, is at a very low level, and it kind of defines, somewhat that, these people couldn't possibly afford to go to a bar. This is where they would be. So that part of the story comes out very well. I would like to see a little bit more definition. I'd like to see that the darkness opened up a little bit, particularly for the individual on the left. And adding to the value proposition over here, I love the way that light comes on the guy's feet on the right, and the guy's shoe on the left. And it also defines the fact that even these two people are at maybe two different levels of, wealth or poverty, whichever way, you want to take it. The definition on the individual on the right is extremely powerful. You can see that intensity. I don't know what they're doing, but it is also intriguing. And every time you have intrigue in an image, it just adds value to a huge extent. And it's all coming together beautifully. Just that little definition on the individual on the left would grossly enhance, whatever the maker is really trying to show. So I'd open that up a little bit. But the rest of it, I love the dark tones, and it's just phenomenal the impact it has. Glenn, what would your comments be? I mean, the individuals.
I do. Thanks, Shiv. I know Anita. She's great. She lives in Algeria, actually, although she's a Melbourne girl originally. Or I beg your pardon, she's from Queensland, Australia. But yeah, this is. I haven't seen this photo before. It is wonderful. I didn't so much see dominoes. I saw two evil, like Darth Sidious and one of those other evil dudes plotting the end of the good guys in Star Wars. That's what I saw. Yeah, I think it's dark in mood as well as in tonality, and that's very evocative. I actually don't see it so much as a documentary picture. I see it as being much more interesting, and it makes me think of the point that often our photographs are as much about what we conceal as what we reveal, because that's where the mystery is, in what's concealed. I totally agree with Shiv when it comes to the tonality. I'm looking at the histogram, so an objective appraisal of the image, and 80, if not 90% of the tones are really at the bottom, like the bottom 20% of the histogram. So it's much darker than it even appears, I think. So I actually think I would definitely be opening up some of those shadows. And whether you do it in Lightroom, or whether you get in and maybe in Photoshop work more selectively with the areas you want to lighten, we can still have the dark mood by having deep blacks. But I think I would definitely be trying to bring a sense of light to some areas, the ones that Shiv mentioned, and I'd also throw a tiny bit on that background, because there's a lot of texture in the image that's actually being hidden by so many dark tones. But overall, I think it's a great image. Anita's wonderful. She does all different types of photography over there. Landscapes. She does a lot of city exploration sort of photographs, architectural ones of the old town, and she's doing some really interesting people-based stuff. So, she's out there. She's not scared. It's a new culture for her, but she's really embracing it. And yeah, we love her in the cohort. She's great.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Glenn. So I'm going to throw a little spanner in the works in terms of not being able to explain the next image. I can tell you who it's by, but as far as the goals, I've not had them through yet, unfortunately. So this next image is by Caleb Asch, and he is a member of A.D. Wheeler's cohort, and he's currently at level 15, and this is his image that he's across. And personally, I see two things when I look at two different types of potential subject here, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think of it and what you would do to enhance it in any way. So off you go, Glenn.
Okay, cheers. It's a fabulous, fabulous scene. This sort of receding, the repetition of the receding mountaintops, and literally the landscape being, well, the clouds being below the landscape. That's a fantastic concept. Tonally, it also looks very interesting, but it's deceiving. It looks like you've got a really dark area in the bottom, but it's not so dark. The histogram tells us we have nothing like a black. And again, I think by just intensifying the blacks a little bit, we won't lose control of the whites. In fact, we'll be building in more contrast just by separating the blacks, and that'll make the image more three-dimensional. Because there'll be more local contrast, between where are we? Between, for instance, this area and this area, that one and that one, that one and that one. So I think we need to do that. We need to intensify the blacks. I'm sorry to say this, but there's a great big dirty a spot up here in the top left, which would need to be attended to. Now, the image was probably put together quite quickly for this. But it's a really nice photo. The other thing he might consider is putting a little bit of warmth into the highlights. 42 is a good number for all sorts of reasons, as a colour in Lightroom, and I think that might help as well, because it's like the feeling of sunlight. You wouldn't necessarily have to change the colour of the blacks, but I think I'd consider putting just a tiny bit into the highlights. But a very interesting image, and again, that concept of layers. It's moving us away from our notion of what the landscape is, because it's kind of like as above, so below, that concept. And I think I wouldn't say it's a spiritual image, but I suppose it could be for some people. There's a lot of metaphors that can be explored in this sort of abstraction of the landscape. So it is very interesting, and I congratulate him for it.
Cool. Shiv?
Well, I love this image, and I think I'm not going to repeat what Glenn has already indicated as far as tones are concerned, but I find that there is a tremendous amount of interest in the lower half of the image, and then you move up into the upper echelons of the image, and it's more like you're very slowly graduating the image into a lot of negative space, which works well. But in this particular case, as the tones go from these very dark, layered, sort of mountain ranges or hills, and with the clouds kind of pouring in, that message is very strong. But the upper negative space, the sky negative space, really plays nothing into the image. It's there just because probably it was there. And if you were to crop that away and make this into a panel, because as the textures deplete, you have that sense of distance. You've already created that. And then what happens is you look at the sky, and it kind of becomes a block, and there's no need for that block. So if the image were to end at that horizontal line just above the cloud layer, I think it becomes very much more stronger, and now you have that little bit of adjustment that Glenn's alluding to, which takes the tonality and adjusts for the blacks and brings more detail into this scene in front, and this very gradual separation of a lot of detail into that negative nothingness, I think makes this image very strong. So my recommendation would be to really crop it away from there and make it into a very distinct panel. It's already a panel, but it even becomes a much more distinct panel. And I think that I would add a huge amount of strength to this image.
Great, thanks very much, Shiv. And I just love how these clouds look like water just pouring over the edge there into the hole just in the end of the thing. That's what I see, as well as it obviously being clouds. But I thought it was really interesting.
Just for a matter of confirmation, Glenn, do you agree with that? Or no?
As far as the sky, getting to the sky, I'm very open to the idea. I'm thinking I'd like to try it. And that's the whole thing. That's what's great about digital, isn't it? Like, you don't have to go back into the darkroom to spend another 3 hours. You just try it.
Just do it, right?
We're not playing for cattle stations. You do a virtual copy in Lightroom, for instance, and you go before, after. It's so simple. But yeah, it's a great concept, because by getting rid of that that sky, the image automatically becomes more abstract, and therefore it encourages us all to see it outside a documentary image and see it more, as metaphor and whatever else. So I think it's a very, very good idea, and it's just a matter of trying it to see whether it works or not. Yeah.
And eventually it's the maker's decision as to what they want to do, it's the viewers, whether you're receptive to any change or you're not receptive to any change. How do you visually perceive those changes? Once again, as I say, it's always the maker's choice. It's their image, but what we see and what we recommend is only based upon how we get the story or how we get the emotional response. And I think that's really what we're trying to do here.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So we're going from Caleb's image, which I didn't have any description from, to an image now which I have a fairly hefty description of. So if you bear with me while we're going through it, but it's very worthwhile, I think. So this has come in from Erin. And she was one of the people that joined A.D. Wheeler on a little Arcanum trip that they went out to Joshua Tree and various other areas out there. So I wanted to say a little bit about what Erin had to say about her image, and also about the experience as a whole. And just as a little fascinating fact about what she's up to tonight, she actually goes to a school of circus arts, and tonight she is flying through the air while we are critiquing her image, so she'll be watching the replay. So yeah, quite an interesting life that she's leading at the moment. So she called her post when she posted this image "Kissed by Sunlight." And what she had to say about the whole experience was that travelling with a pack of talented photographers was nerve-wracking. One step out of the car into Joshua Tree National Park and my anxiety was sky high. I don't know enough to be shooting with all these experienced people. Who am I to think I can keep up with these people? They're all going to see how much I don't know. Ah, okay, mind, shut it. You can do this. You will do this. Fear is my friend. It's only a sign that I'm out of my comfort zone, and good things come every time we push past my comfort zone. And she goes on with a little bit more in the blog post there, but essentially I think we can all relate to that, and I thought it was a really interesting insight into what people feel when they go on these sorts of trips. And we've had a few different Arcanum gatherings now. So we had the online gathering, there was a photo walk in New York recently, Trade did one in London, and I think that although people might be a little bit apprehensive about going to them and meeting up with people, almost every time, like 99% of the time, people enjoy the experience and really get something valuable from it. So I recommend, I'll put all the links in the show notes later on, but I recommend going and reading the rest of Erin's blog post. But what do you guys have to share on the image?
I think it's my turn, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I love what she's done here. I mean, clearly, whatever that nervousness was, I think was gone by the time she set up, which is great. When I look at this image, I see the power of this one tree, and the warm tones really sort of come at you, and to me, tones cold and warm. I mean, there's an interplay here which is great. You've got all that receding cold tone, and you've got that beautiful warm tone coming at you. Absolutely phenomenal. I look at the structure of the image from a compositional point of view, and this is not, in my opinion, a recognizable landscape, so you can do things to it. If you look at the direction of the clouds are actually coming right to left, moving upwards. You're looking at the tree line, the small tree on the extreme right, leading to a middle-sized tree, and then to this major, tree that is sitting somewhere in the 1/3 position on the left of the frame. When you enter the frame, as our brains typically tend to move from left to right, you come to this tree and you kind of stop for a little bit, rather than flow through the image. And as I said before, this is not a recognizable landscape, so it would be very easy to flip this horizontally left-right. And now what you do is you create a very strong leading line from that small tree to the mid-tree to the big one. All the clouds are also moving your eyes into the direction of this major tree structure that is there. And then you have an image that, in my opinion, is very strong. Not that it isn't strong as it is, but you're always looking to make it, how much stronger can I make this image, and how much more can I tell? And if she blogged about her nervousness, flip this image and all that nervousness will go away.
Glenn?
She sounds like an artist. And I've known a few circus performers in my time, and they live their life in that state of anxiety. But that's what fuels the creative juices. Sometimes they can be a bit heavy on relationships, but that's the nature of what it is to be that kind of artist. Yeah, I like the image too. I think it's very strong. I think it does have those textual qualities in the big tree. And folks, if you're not seeing that, just again, if you've got it in Lightroom, click on B and W, and where does your eye go? It goes to those sort of fronds on the tree, and so that's the texture, and it also goes to the clouds in the top corner of the image. So the texture's quite good, and that's a really nice thing to have in a colour photo. I think, yeah, structurally it's good. I like the sort of triangular shape from the smaller trees going up to the big tree and then back down again. You know, this is what composition is. The placement of the big tree on the thirds, and then that sort of triangle going up and going down again. I think I also like the faint hint of grasses we're seeing in the bottom left of the image. It breaks up those really dense shadows, and I think it would be nice to do a little bit of dodging from the center across to the right, because there are other grasses that we're just not seeing at the moment. I mean, even just moving I'm doing it on my screen, even just moving the shadow slider actually works quite well. It's revealed another level to the landscape. So I think I reckon that in itself helps. I also like the fact that we're going from a fairly deep blue sky into a more cyan-coloured sky, or if you like, aqua sky near the horizon, because that gives a sense of three-dimensional space in the sky as well, you know, foreground to background. Yeah, I congratulate her. I think it's a good shot. I think she's put it together very well, and I just think to open up those shadows would make the image sing a little bit more.
Great, thanks very much, Glenn. If anyone wants to check out the pictures from the trip that people were posting as they were driving, well, not they weren't posting as they were driving, but you know, as they pulled over to the side of the road and posted their picture, you can do a search on various different social medias for hashtag Arcanum Cali. That's all one word, ending in an I. And you'll be able to track down all the images, including the ones from Erin. So, I'll move on to the next one now. And this one is from Jake McCluskey. He's in AD Wheeler's cohort, or was, because he's now level 20. And he called this image Phoenix Rising from Icy Waters. And I had a quick chat with him earlier on and discussed, you know, what was he looking to do when he was taking this picture. So he says, my goal when shooting it was to capture the first flowing water I've seen this year with a great sunset. But then I found out that the only place to capture the shot, the way I envisioned it, was to stand in the freezing water without any rubber boots. And so take a panel to get it all in, because I wanted the smooth flowing cold water and the bright, warm, fiery sunset. So has he achieved his goals, and what could he have done differently?
Yes, he's achieved his goals. I think as far as doing things, well, what's good about it too, other than the colour and the flowing water, which is great, we've also got, you know, the ice contrasting with the perceived heat of the sunrise. Did you say?
It was sunset.
Sunset. Okay. And I like how the shape of the ice, the various ice blocks here, is somewhat echoed in the shape of the hills. You know, these things are sometimes, well, they're quite often accidental, but if you look at the image long enough, you start to see things that maybe are working compositionally on a subconscious level. The trees in silhouette, these are good trees for silhouettes because they don't have a lot of leaves on them. So, you know, it's really just line, and backlit subjects work well in silhouette when they're not so dense, you know, filled with leaves. So I think it's a good scene to be photographed this way. I think my only concern is horizon looks okay. I think my only concern is the kind of burnt ironing effect that's happening in the sky. Now, if it was a black and white image and, you know, you overdid, for instance, the highlight slider to try to bring down a very bright highlight, it becomes kind of veiled or grey. And I think we're seeing that same thing here. And, you know, I suspect it's a HDR, but I just think if it was the HDR, it's probably like a -2, 0, +2, and it looks to me as though we needed a greater range of exposures. and I think it's in having to bring it down, bring those highlights down, it's kind of dirtied them up a bit. And the other thing is there is a considerable difference in colour between the blue in the top left and the top right. One's like a purple colour, because it's like blue and magenta, and the other one is, a sort of kind of cleaner sky colour. Is that a problem? Well, not necessarily, but it's very noticeable, and I'm not sure if I'd want someone to notice that in my image. I think those areas would frame the sunset better if they were the same. And I think both Shiv and I are giving comments that are, I think, really appropriate to the kind of images we're seeing, because the vast majority have been landscapes, and particularly traditional landscapes. Photographers look at them in a very traditional manner, and your technique has to be flawless. It doesn't necessarily have to be flawless in photojournalism, for instance, or sports. Well, it's a different kind of technique, I suppose. But as far as tonality and colour and composition, those things are really critical in this sort of work, and I think that's being echoed in the comments we're making. But it's a fabulous image. It must have been great to be there, and overall, yes, I definitely think he's met his designs in this.
Awesome. And funny you should mention there have been a lot of landscape so far. We're about to change that in a moment after Shiv has given his feedback on this, so we'll change it up a little bit for the next image. So fire away, Shiv.
All right. So my take on this is, if I could split this image into two halves, I love the lower half. I absolutely love it. I mean, it's just gorgeous. Then I look at the top, and I agree with Glenn. I think the differences, it's not just the left corner to the right corner, but the amount of difference in the blues is a little bothersome, because if you do have so much of this fire in the sky, and you have done the HDR, sort of tonal adjustments, some of it has got a little muddied up, and that can clearly be cleaned, because you could potentially take one of the three images if there are three, or one of the 5 images if you did a 5 image HDR, which I doubt this was, but let's assume you did have an image that had that cloud layer really nice and with a lot of that warm tones to it, and it's now gone grey. Maybe just mask that back in, and that might be perfect for what you want to do. I also like the fact that your slow shutter speed has affected some of the clouds and kind of made them a little more feathery and a little bit more exaggerated, particularly on the left side. But it's just those blues that are bothering me, and you can actually adjust those by doing some similar treatment that you might want to do if you were doing portraiture, where you adjust skin tones and you adjust for skin color, and bring it all to the same blues. They can be darker, but you really want the same blues. You don't want the purples coming in or the magentas coming in into the sky. But apart from that, composition, wonderful. The way you've got the horizon, that's very strong. And echoing what Glenn mentioned, the structure of the ice, which echoes the structure of the hills, is also really well rendered. I mean, it's beautifully done, and as I said, the light, the colors, everything is great. Just fix the sky, and you've got a winner, absolute winner.
Great, thanks for that, Shiv. So now for something completely different. And this is an image from Jennifer Moore, who is in Les Imgren's cohort, and she's currently level 18. And here's what she had to say about this particular image. So she says, I wanted to capture the joy and pride in the kid's face. He and 2 girls right behind him had been passing the sandwich you see in his hand back and forth along with the birds and taking photos. The girls were squealing a lot, but he was super cool about it. The girls took photos for him, but the kid wasn't satisfied without taking a selfie on top of it. He was proud of himself in a major way. All this was going on while the carnival festivities were kicking off in the square. And she says, I fought with the contrast in the main pigeon for a long time. The top feather tips kept Unplugged getting lost in the shadow of that arch, I ended up using Nick Colour Effects to paint a high key mask on the bird before converting it to black and white. I'm hoping that the mild glow left behind passes for the work of natural sunlight. So what do you guys think? And I think Shiv, you to go first.
No, I think this is yours, isn't it? No, it's mine. Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's yours.
I'm looking at the format, and I'm just wondering if there was more on the left to kind of complete the story, because the way you just read what you read, it implies that those two individuals in the back are equally important and part of the story. And you know, his taking the selfie implies that they weren't doing a good job, or he wasn't convinced that they would get the job done. So to cut her off the way she's been cut off, to me, I find that to be a little disturbing. You know, clearly if that individual had been in the frame in their entirety, whether they're taking a shot or not, or assisting in taking the shot, but that you know, cutting it at the face and halfway across the body, I find that to be, you know, bothersome. As far as the main subject is concerned, and the pigeons, the dark feathers or the lack of separation doesn't bother me so much, because I think the story is what is already there. I mean, you've got these pigeons, they're on his hand, there's 3 of them, and the excitement on his face is just absolutely incredible. If there was, and it's kind of hard to go back and do it again because this is a spur-of-the-moment image in street photography, I would recommend that if the individual is really doing a lot of street photography, is to look at the f-stop as far as aperture is concerned and keep the background muted, or you know, just reduce the depth of field to the extent where the busyness goes away and the primary matter remains very strong. The little bit of a, you know, blown highlight, that's not a problem. I mean, that probably can be easily fixed with a little highlight adjustment. But it's the expression, and the story is in the left half of the frame, and unfortunately that cutaway is what's, you know, really bothering me the most. Glenn, all yours.
Yes.
Cheers. Yeah, the story is fantastic. It really is a marvelous image, and it'd be one you'd imagine this child would hold on to, hopefully, for decades to come, and you know, his kids would enjoy it as well and laugh about that old-fashioned phone. Yeah, I think it is too busy. Yeah, it's hard because how do you control something like this? You know, the very notion of a candid moment is that it's very difficult to control things. But you know, look at Cartier-Bresson's work. He was able to control the composition better than anyone else, and yet he was working theoretically with candid subject matter. I think it's interesting. Oh, okay. Well, how do you photograph a forest? You know, you can't. So you talk about the forest by photographing a stand of trees, or a single tree, or a leaf. And the problem here is this is a forest people. So the notion of putting the ones in the background more out of focus is absolutely a great way to do it. Another way, which clearly wasn't possible, but you know, if you got up higher and photographed downwards, that might make the child the young guy stand out a bit more. And I suppose if he was lifting his face up, providing it didn't cause him to squint, he'd actually have more even lighting on his face as well. Small stuff. The other way would be possibly to get down very low, and that would minimise potentially the distracting background. But of course, it's part of the story, isn't it? All the people in the environment, but yet the chaos of the world. This is a metaphor from landscape photography, if you like. The job of the landscape photographer is to introduce cohesiveness into nature, and nature is chaotic. And I think that's the kind of approach that you'd be trying to take here, trying to separate this young person from their surroundings in various ways. If there was a bit of space between him and the girls, or between the birds and the guy on the right, that would also help. But look, it's a very good image, and maybe even putting a fairly strong vignette around the image might help this this guy kind of come forwards in the photograph. But it's a very good photograph. I've just got to say one last thing. It's presented as a square, which is fantastic. I wonder if it was shot in landscape or portrait mode. And the reason I say that is we've got this direction of the phone, which is vertical, portrait if you like. If the phone, let's imagine it was a landscape orientation, I'd be thinking, wouldn't it be great if the phone was also in a landscape, because it would accentuate the actual composition, you know, the frame that the canvas that the image is placed in. I hope that makes sense. But look, overall it's a fantastic image, and we're searching for things to make it an unbelievable image. So none of this is criticism, because it's already a very strong photo.
Great, thanks very much, Glenn. And now we have something from Larry Clay. He's in Ron Clifford's cohort, and he's level 13 currently. And I have a little short note from him about the image. And he says, I was working on doing black and white cityscapes, and as part of that I was doing building details. I really liked the feel of the gentle S-curve through the centre of reflected chaos. It had a kind of a yin and yang feeling about it. So, Glenn, fire away.
No worries. I'm sorry to say this, and we can keep on this image, but I just wanted to give the photographer of the last image another quick tip. If you search for that photograph made in Paris at the end of the Second World War, where the sailor grabs the nurse and gives her a kiss, that was a very chaotic scene, and the photographer has been able to separate the subject from the surroundings, the surrounding people. So that's kind of what we're talking about, I think. Okay, so just finding the picture. Yeah, yin yang. Well, yeah, I don't think it's successful in that regard. I can see what the photographer Larry has. I can see what he's saying, but I just don't think it's communicated that successfully. I think making it black and white helps, because if you look at the yin yang symbol, of course, it's black and white. And it's been divided roughly in 50-50 into light and dark. You've got that diagonal line also, which is, you know, regarded as a feminine line, so it's a more gentle division of the frame, and yet it's also more energetic, more youthful, rather than a straight horizontal line separating top from bottom. Yeah, but I don't know. I think I just don't think it's worked, and I think that's probably because of the conditions that the photo was made under. So, you know, these are reflective surfaces, and you actually need an interesting reflection, therefore, for the photo to work. And the bottom half is just too dark. I think if there's something of interest going on either inside the building or reflected into the glass, we're not seeing that because it's too dark. You can get away in a black and white image with having very light tones in certain circumstances, and I guess it's got that purity, that sort of that feeling of light and sky in the top half, but the bottom half, you know, it's in between. It's neither black nor is it nor are the shadows open. I think we need to be able to see into those areas to determine whether it's interesting or not. But I'm sorry to say, although I completely understand what Larry's on about, I don't think it's worked in this photo.
Shiv, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm having a serious problem. I'm not being able to open this image, so I'm going to comment on it with it being rather small on my screen. I concur with what Glenn is saying. It's, you know, you come across an image, and the first thing I typically look for is, does it have or does it create any kind of an emotional response? And if it does, so what is that response? And then you can sort of take it to the next level to ascertain what the communication is and what the maker is really trying to tell you when they take an image like this. I'm not getting that in its entirety. I'm getting a feeling that somewhere the maker wanted to say something and the sentence kind of is left incomplete. But again, my apologies, I'm not being able to open this image up to a full size to be able to really get into it anymore. And I'm having the same problem with all the images from here on forward. So I don't know whether my Google Drive download kind of messed up the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 images.
Okay. What I'll do then, Shiv, is while Glenn starts talking about the next image, I'll, in fact, Jack, could you do that? Could you fire the final few images just up onto a folder and share it with Shiv? And then that way he can grab them from you while Glenn talks about the next image, and then hopefully we'll be back on track after that. Just as a point of note, because I'm conscious of the time and we did start a little bit late, we're up to 5 to the hour now, so we've got roughly 4 images to go, so if we can just keep that in mind for the next few critiques. Obviously want to give everyone the feedback they deserve, but we'll go through those ones.
All right, I'm sorry, let me interject. I've now, what I did is I did something nasty and I have the image open. So I quickly re-downloaded those, and so all right. So here I now have the image, and I agree with Glenn. I mean, this is what I call a 50-50 image, and unfortunately it's not a horizontal 50-50. There is a diagonal to it that at least gives it some level of being dynamic, and there is some visual movement through the image, and that's strong. What it's not doing is, again, I do go back to what I said originally, is the sentence is kind of left incomplete, somewhere mid-sentence. Could something be done to this? Conceivably, yes. I mean, there are some nice reflections in the brighter areas. There is some interesting stuff going on in the dark areas. I find that the framing element, if that's what the maker desired on the right-hand side, could in fact be eliminated, because now you're left with a total abstract. So there is no definitive end to this, which that panel on the right tends to create. It's graphic. There are patterns. It's repetition, but yet nowhere for you to land and rest and enjoy something. You're sort of going back and forth. So I'm not saying the image is a failure. I think the image needs something more. And what it is, it's really dependent upon where the photographer was when he shot this, and what else could he have done to either include or exclude to accentuate and hopefully to complete that sentence.
Thanks for that, Shiv. I believe it was taken in Las Vegas, not that we know exactly where in Las Vegas, because I'm sure that we're not Google Maps, but yeah, there's definitely some interesting stuff going on there. I kind of wonder as well what the color version would have been like. I know that wasn't Larry's goal on this, but it's interesting, with it being Vegas, how much color would have come out at you if you saw it in color. So yeah, but all useful feedback. So we'll move on now to one of the next images, and this next image is from someone I know well, because like myself, she's from Ollie Dale's cohort, and this is Mel Wolverson, and this has an interesting little mini backstory to it, because Mel is working on an ABC book, so obviously this is a Jaguar, so this will be the J page, and what she has said about the image is that she's added texture and filters to it, and she's going for an illustrated effect, like something out of a children's book, because that's kind of the goal behind it. So I've actually seen this in an earlier form as well, and it came through the cohort when we were having a recent hangout, and we had some input into that just around things that were going on in the background and stuff like that. So how would you guys say for a J page in an ABC book, what could she do to enhance that?
Whose turn is it? I can't remember.
I believe it'll be Shiv first.
It's my turn. It's my turn.
Right.
You know, a lot of this, if this image is for purposes of illustration, and for a children's book or a book, whatever, I think one of the things that you want to do is either make it totally abstract as far as color is concerned, or keep the colors exactly what the colors are with a subject like this. You know, creating textures and backgrounds is wonderful to accentuate, but you either want to make the jaguar or a leopard or a panther or whatever really be realistic as far as colors are concerned. There is an interesting story here. I mean, the creature is in motion. He's you know, moving from right to left, which is great because, you know, you enter the image and you come, you know, head on and meet the subject, and that's beautiful. But again, the colors of the subject are bothering me, but the overall tones that have been created is this, you know, semi-light sepia, which is great. There's a little bit of cool blueness in the background, and all interesting. You know, multiple photographs of the same subject may have at some point resulted in the eye being open, and that might have been a stronger image. Because again, if you are using it, and I'm really referencing the book or you know, the J chapter. So now you want to be able to see not just the subject in its state of motion, but hopefully also be able to see the eye and the intensity that these creatures exude, particularly the way a cat is. I mean, a cat is a very powerful creature, and you want to show that. Here, with the eyes closed, it looks subdued. And to me, it's not portraying that power that this creature actually has.
Okay, thanks for that, Shiv. Yep.
Yes, it's I just wish we had more time. You know, I'm speaking quite fast as it is to try to, and you know, well, I'm just responding intuitively, as I'm sure Shiv is too, because it's kind of great to not having seen the images, just to respond off the cuff. I find that, you know, quite invigorating. There's a lot going on that's good about this image. For me, I would probably go with the texture, but I would consider removing it from the animal. That's what I would. That would be my initial thinking, and I think I prefer it actually flipped, where the animal is moving left to right into space. But it just depends. Like, is it going to be an e-book where there's one page shown at a time on screen, or is it a traditional book where possibly you've got images on the left and right that you're looking at? Because, I mean, at the moment, if you flip it, you could put text, for instance, on the right-hand side. And that would make sense either as a single image or a photo on the left side of the book. But if it was a photo on the right side of the book, then I'd probably go back to the standard orientation. So I've got, you know, there's some questions I would have before I really knew what to say in relation to that. But they're the sort of things I'd think about. Now, what's interesting, yeah, I agree about the eyes, because in animal photography, just like in human photography, if you can't connect, well, we connect with the subject through the eyes. And of course, animals often have such amazing eyes. I think that the power is also lost to an extent, because we're photographing down on the animal, so it doesn't look as powerful. However, I suppose it's starting to blend into the background, and that's interesting because it reminds me of some of who's that great wildlife and travel photographer, Art Wolf. He did an amazing series a couple of years ago on basically people and blending them into an environment in a studio background where he painted them and painted the environment. But prior to that, he did a book photographing in the landscape, photographing animals and birds, and they're kind of exploring their natural camouflage and how they can actually disappear into the surroundings. So the image could actually go more in that direction as well. I think this is an image with great possibilities. But at the moment, the way I see it, I think I would be trying to bring some sharpness back into the animal, and I would do that by removing the texture from the animal itself, as it currently is. Otherwise, I'd be trying to blend it into the background a bit more.
Great.
But it depends on the concept, you know, of the book.
If the maker is in fact listening to this, or if you could message the maker,
She is.
I'd love to have some more discussion on this, because there's a lot more going on here that I just don't know, and I'd like to find out more to be able to give a little bit more definitive critique.
Okay, that's fine. I'll actually put you in touch with her at the end of the hangout, Shiv, so you can have a little chat and give her some more feedback, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Right, so we've got 3 to go, and again, conscious of the time, so we'll try and squeeze them in. The next one is from Sandra Jordan, and she, again, is someone who's familiar to Glenn. She's Sphere 1 of his cohort, and I'll tell you what she had to say about this one. So she says, a lot of photography for me is seeing something that just feels right, a gut reaction to something. I'm immediately sucked into something, or I'm not. What drew me to this image was the intense colours standing side by side. I like the orange in the bike matched the orange in the neighbour's house, that the little dog was sitting there looking into the image and not out of it, and that the orange brick wall reflected in the window of the purple house tied in with the orange of the other house. So those were the things that she had to say about that image. What do you guys think?
I think this one's yours, Glenn.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, Shiv. Yeah, okay. Okay, so first of all, I have to say, folks, you're probably picking up that Shiv and I may well be brothers. You know, we're certainly kindred spirits because of the way we're approaching the feedback. Even when we're talking about technical things, I think we're trying to come at it in a kind of with a poetic language, if you like. I think, yeah, I really like the image. I think I'm very much into duality, you know, opposites. And we certainly have this light and dark, warm and cool throughout the whole image. It is very symmetrical, and yet it's broken up from that. I like that, like the fact that it's not quite, it's off-center. It's not a 50-50 vertical division down the middle of the frame. I like the fact that the back wheel of the bike protrudes into the orange. You know, it just breaks it up, and that's what gives a sense of reality to it, that it is highly composed, but you can see, look at the left of the image, you know, with the gap between the orange and the shutter. It's perfect, you know, the alignment, and at the top as well. So it's highly structured, highly composed, and yet there are those elements that sort of nudge it into the real world. I like that. I love the saturation of the image. I won't say any more. I think it's very successful. I do want to say that Sandra is amazing, super positive, and she photographs all sorts of stuff, architectural photography. Her architectural stuff's great. She does some great street-based people observations, and she does an enormous amount of Arctic photography. You know, she travels up to the Arctic, and it's really, so she's very diverse, and she really just embraces all opportunities. And we're working with her now to do some more abstract stuff based on doorways she's photographed in, I think it's Morocco. So yeah, she's wonderful to work with, and I'm really happy that you folks have seen just a taste of what she does.
And Shiv?
Oh, you know, the thing that I always sort of try and tell my students is, if you can create an image or take an image that compels a viewer to just hang around and look and look and spend a lot of time, then that image is very successful. And to me, this image does that. I mean, there is so much to look at. There is so much to absorb, and there are so many questions that just completes this whole scenario here with so, I mean, you know, Glenn talked about the symmetry. You look at the two windows that were not included, but yet there was just enough inclusion to echo the windows on the left. You know, there's that space component that adds to it. Everything is straight lines, straight lines, straight lines, and then you have the bicycle, which has circular elements that complement the image, the dog that just does wonders to that doorway, and then when you finish looking at that doorway, you wonder what happened to this door on the left. I mean, why is it that it has that thing draped over it? What's going on? What's being hidden? Why are you not showing that? I mean, there's just story after story, and I compliment the maker, because to create something like this, I mean, I could talk about this image for the next hour. So yeah, I'll shut up.
Thanks for that, Shiv. Yeah, that's again, it's something that's completely different from what we've seen before, which I rather enjoyed seeing these images come in earlier on and them all be quite different.
I think the next time you've got to send us these images when you get them, so we can, you know, absorb them just the way.
Part of me says yes, that's absolutely what I should do, and part of me says no, it's much more fun for you to see them on the fly. So the second from last image that we're going to have time to squeeze in today.
All right, we'll do a quick one on this. You know, again here it's all about story and what's going on, and I think what's happened here is that somewhere the maker has taken components of color and diluted them. I'm not talking about desaturation, I'm just talking about dilution of value of color, and then intensified things like the dark sky to potentially bring out more detail in the clouds. But I'm not getting the message. I'm really, this is one of those images like that other architectural image that we had earlier. It's not telling me the story, but what I have missed, I'm sorry, I didn't wait for you to finish your statement about the image.
Yeah, so this is from Thior, who's in Ollie Dale's cohort, and it actually caused quite a discussion in the cohort, but I'm not going to go into that just now due to time constraints. But what we do have is that he says that he was out chasing colours during fall, and as every good geek would, he liked the RGB colours that were in the image and the texture of the wood overall. So he was just trying to emphasise those sorts of things with the image.
Okay, so I mean, if that's the intent, you know, some of it clearly, the texture in the wood, as far as whether it's a barn or a house or whatever, is showing up to some extent, but there's not a whole lot of it. I find that had he worked the fence to pull the texture in the fence, and I think the fence potentially has a lot of texture because I can see some of it, there's a lot more extraction. I mean, just, you know, adding a lot more contrast to the fence, bringing out more detail, and not necessarily having the eyes get pulled away to the bright area where the clouds are, because he's darkened the sky considerably, and you can actually see a bit of the haloing that has taken place in the upper roof line. You know, your eyes just get pulled right away into those bright clouds on the extreme right, and you forget about really looking at texture. So what he tried to achieve is kind of got pulled away from the image. And, you know, in the essence of time, I'd let Glenn give me his comments, or give us his comments.
Okay, yeah, I totally agree. I think the top third of the image, almost half of the image, it's far too contrasty. The roof were pulled away to the left with the bright roof. The sky were pulled away to the bright cloud, but even worse, I think, to the bright trees on the left of the image. And it's largely because the sky's just way too dark in the center. And it's a weird blue, just like it's a weird green. I think you can get by with the reds being this. It's okay to desaturate, but I think it's the hue I'm talking about. That looks like someone's had the spray out and poisoned the grass, actually. So sorry about that, Thior, but I think I'd have a look at playing with the contrast, but also particularly in the sky, but also then the hue of the greens. I think that's just wrong, and also the hue of the blues. And the other thing is, you know, if you're having a lot of trouble, just make it black and white, because it actually will work even as it is better in black and white, because we won't mind those bright tones, be it the fence, be it the clouds, or even the trees. I think the main problem in black and white would become the bright roof and that dark sky right in the middle, but it's got less problems in black and white than it does in colour. So sorry about that, because there are some nice elements in the image, but I think the way it's been realised is unsuccessful.
Okay, thanks for that, Glenn. So we have one image to go, and this one is again something quite different to the rest. So this is from Vincent Anderson, who is part of Mark Helm's cohort, and he's titled this Poster from Hell. And I'll just give you a little bit of information on what he had to say. So he says that these are images of people from all over the city, so I assume his city, wherever he is, and he's combined them. He added the colour to enhance the feeling of the emotion that he was trying to present. The images of the people were representing the emotions of someone being torn between the difference of good and evil in someone. So what do you think, Glenn? Successful?
Yeah, I love it. Oh, gee, I like this at the top left, F-18, and I'm not thinking about a fighter plane. I'm thinking about, with that little symbol there, the old rebate on film. You know, used to get this information, frame number 1, frame number 2, that sort of stuff. Shiv's mentioned the term image maker, which is actually a term that I use a lot too. And it's particularly important when you think about something like street art, because there's this notion that, oh, if it's a straight documentary photograph, what have you done? It's not yours, it's someone else's. Well, for a start, it's public art, but what makes it yours is the way you interpret it, the way you make the photograph. And also, to my mind, there's a big difference between being an image maker and an image taker. I think it's really critical, and that gets back to the personality of the individual as much as to sort of creative artistic intention. But I think this is a beautiful image, and I think it's a standout for the day. We've had some fantastic photographs, but this one is just gorgeous. The colour palette is wonderful. I love the olive greens in particular, and I also like the sort of more orange brown colours in the top section. But the notion of frames within frames, where we're looking at each of these individual people, kind of shot a little bit like hero images, you know, like for a movie or something like that. And it's got texture in it because of the fact is these things deteriorate over time, so they have a life of their own. You know, the Ladakhis of northern India say we are born to die, you know, and so this image, it's a moment in time, but it also talks about decay and metamorphosis. There's so many levels to this photograph, and I haven't even mentioned the text yet, but it's just bloody beautiful. So congratulations to Vincent. I love it.
Thanks, Glenn. Shiv?
Oh, can I say beautiful?
Yep.
You know, I would echo Glenn completely. I mean, there's a few things that are so striking here. Number one, if you look at the clothes, they're all the same. They're all wearing the same clothes. Lines have been added to differentiate just a little bit, but you know, they're wearing the same thing. The eyes, there are eyes that are looking at you, and then there are eyes that are staring at you, and then there are no eyes at all. And all of this has an interplay that is just absolutely phenomenal. You know, you talk about decay, you talk about, you know, that one frame on the extreme right that's peeling, and then you look at the frame in the middle that has in fact peeled away. Yet that expression, those two frames are the only ones that are completely different. You know, you've got an eye, that person with the eyes closed, none of the other eyes are closed. You've got this other guy whose eyes are closed, but they're crossed over, basically implying something else. So each of these individually has a story to tell, and collectively, those, you know, added words that you don't need to read them because the feeling just exudes from these individual images. And I think the makers just, you know, I hope they're all his images, and I hope this compilation is, you know, something that becomes you know, a series that works, and they can be individuals, they can be put together like this. I mean, this is worthy of showcasing.
Thanks for that, Shiv. So that was where we're going to finish up the critiques, and thank you very much, guys, for giving your feedback. I hope that the people who submitted the images found them useful. Just stop sharing the screen for just now.
And if not, they have no choice, but they've already heard it.
Yes, absolutely. So what we'll do now is we'll spend just a couple of moments going through some of the stuff that's come through on Twitter, if we have anything, Jack, that people might have submitted while we were talking there, and then we'll finish up with talking about what Glenn and Shiv have been up to recently.
Yeah, we've just got a few things coming through. Definitely some great comments, some great feedback going over on Twitter. Thank you so much, Shiv and Glenn, for the awesome critiques. It's very well received from what we can see. Stu, I've got one image that I'm going to share from Twitter, and it's from our very own hero, the great Tanya Wallace. Let me get in here. Screen share. Bear with me. Can you see my screen here?
And indeed, yes.
Here it is. She has found Ollie Dale. He's actually on vacation somewhere in this hammock. So whatever he told you, Stu, it's all lies.
Well, tip that hammock.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you everybody for hanging out over there on Twitter. It was very fun.
Cool. So is that everything we've got to share for just now then? Yeah.
Yeah, that's for the most part. Like I said, Tanya was sharing some good images, but I knew we had to share that one.
She's always up to mischief, is Tanya.
She really is.
Yes. Cool. Right, so Glenn, if you've got anything you want to share with us before we finish up for the day.
Okay. I can run through quickly a few images. Stuff that I've put on my site recently and stuff that's about to go up, I suppose. So travelphotographyguru.com. So a very quick screen share. Here we go. Yeah, I suppose most folks know me through landscape photography, but I love doing portraiture, particularly natural light portraiture. So I just thought I'd run through a few. And I love doing black and white as much as I do colour. You know, I think there are two sides to my personality, and that kind of comes out in what I photograph as well as how I photograph it, and of course why I photograph. I'm not known at all for street photography. I've done very little of it, but it's fun. This is down in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. This one's in Paris, I believe, or Moscow. I can't remember. But I think it's. Oh no, it's near Moscow. Sorry, it's near St. Petersburg. That's right. But yeah, I love striking black and whites. I like dynamic black and white images. This is a portrait, an older one. I'm just dragging up a whole lot of stuff. And so here's another street image, and I think there's quite a lot going on if you look at all the faces in the photograph. So I'm not known for candid photography. I've done very little of it. I love looking at it, and it was nice, to get out and have a go at it. Graffiti photograph. I'm doing a lot of work lately re-exploring Photoshop. I'm coming up with a new workflow for me that is great because, like a lot of folks, I was really just using Lightroom for most of my work over recent years. But now I've come back to Photoshop with a lot of vigor, and I'm enjoying it very much, what I'm able to get out of the colours and contrast. That's one that's on the site at the moment on a recent blog post from Red Square. And that's my ebook, which is doing quite well, photographing cemeteries, and it has so much more going on in it than cemeteries. There's a number of essays in it really describing kind of the artist's life, the artist's approach, if you like. There's a last couple quick photos from the book. It's not all abstract, but it moves from sort of documentary photography of cemeteries into more abstract imaging. And I talk about how that's done, and very little of it's done in the computer. And that's The last one was Antarctica. This is South Georgia Island on the way to Antarctica. I haven't finished that one. I was working on it just before the Hangout started. And then that's me, you know, probably the best shot in my portfolio.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Glenn. Have you got any workshops coming up that you want to mention, or should we just point people at your website?
Oh, thanks. No, these days, most of my teaching's done in the Arcanum, or alternatively, I still work at one of the local schools in Melbourne, but that's kind of just a local thing, and I don't run that as a business. I just contract there, so no, nothing. I've got a couple more ebooks I'm working on, so they'll come out over the next few months. The next one will be on Antarctica, which I think will be good.
Excellent. And Shiv, do you have anything you want to share today?
No images. Most of my images are on my website, on my blog, but I do want to mention that I'm working on a revision to my ebook on time-lapse photography. I was a Canon shooter, and I kind of oriented the book to DSLRs and using DSLRs for time-lapse, and 1 year ago I switched to mirrorless, and I think the book needs a big revision because mirrorless is so much better for time-lapse than DSLRs. So I'm working on that. Hopefully that'll be ready by about the fall this year. But as far as workshops are concerned, yes, still a lot of workshops, traveling a lot. I have 2 big workshops coming up back-to-back in September, both in Iceland. One of them is going to be landscapes with models, and we're going to be hiring a bunch of models from Iceland. And then the other one is purely a landscape sort of adventure with potential early aurora possibilities late September. And then, you know, Vietnam after that, and then who knows what else. But I've still got to get my agenda fully established and the schedule on the website, which will be up pretty soon. And apart from that, you know, lots of smaller workshops, 3-day workshops. We just sold out the Martha's Vineyard workshop. Doing a lot of work up in New Jersey and New York for professional photographers on product photography. And give me a holler, and if you want more comments, whether you like them or not, I'll give them to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Shiv. So before we finish up, I just want to apologise to anyone who sent in an image that we didn't have time to get to today. There were a bunch of them, so apologies for that. And if you keep a hold of them, and we'll probably do another show like this in the future, so you can resubmit them or submit something different, and we'll try and get to them then. I'll include in the show notes a link to all the images, or the person who submitted them, their G+ profile, so you can go and check out more from the people that you've seen today. And I hope that it was as useful a show for the people who got their images critiqued as it was for you guys watching, because I know when I watch critiques in the Grand Library, I always pick up little tips here and there that are going to enhance my images by watching what's said to other people. So I hope the same has been true of this show. And thanks again to Glenn and to Shiv and to Jack for joining me today, and we'll be back to a normal Creation Wars next week, and yeah, look forward to speaking to you all then. So I shall stop the broadcast and see you all soon. Bye.
Thank you, Stuart, for hosting. Yes. Yep. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.